Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 23rd season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 247 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Jack Washer, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV, Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage, no matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Welcome to Nittany Nation Overtime.
And welcome into Nittany Nation Overtime. I am Jack Washer, joined by the NitWits. Let's meet them from left to right on your screen. Mark Brennan from FightOnState.com and Lions 247. Neil Rudell from the Altoona Mirror. And former Penn State great Mike Irwin, who's still hanging around Central PA. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining me. Mark, Penn State, they lost as 24-point favorites. They had outscored Maryland by 156 points over the last 3 games. 0-3 for the first time since 2001. I mean, what do we say now? I mean, this is, watching yesterday, that was pathetic.
Well, depending on your political party, mailing it in is either good or bad. But if you're a Penn State football fan, mailing it in is not a good thing. And that's sort of one of the few times in James Franklin's era we saw a Penn State football team mail it in. I was very surprised. Usually when this team has had its back up against the wall after a couple of losses, it's come out and played really well. Clearly that was not the case. A lot of blame to go around. I don't think they played well on either side of the ball. The first couple weeks we talk about not playing complementary. They didn't play well on either side of the ball. You got some good things out of special teams. Once again looked unprepared from a coaching standpoint. I just wonder if everything that's gone on this year, it's impacted everybody, but some programs have handled it better than others. Obviously, this program has not handled it well from the football side. From the testing and keeping guys healthy, they've done a great job. But from the football winning games, they've really struggled.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think this is beyond right now an X and O situation. This is an internal passion, desire to play this game, and we didn't see that yesterday. I mean, a 4-touchdown favorite to be down 35-7 and just sort of look like they were sleepwalking, no fire. Hey, they've now been outscored in the first half 66-20. They haven't been ready to play this season or each of these individual games. You would have thought after you're 0-2 and played decent in the second half against Ohio State that they would have been ready to go against Maryland at home. A lot of problems right now, and I think this is really James Franklin's a real test for him in his tenure to bring this back this season and really avoid a really bad year.
Mike, what are you seeing when Mark says, mailing it in and whatnot? What signs are you seeing as a former player where a team just is not in it mentally and they're just looking to get out of the game healthy?
Well, I agree with these guys that they haven't played well at either side of the ball. But I think we're forgetting one thing. I think Maryland has a really good team, and I don't think they showed it up until this point. They have a lot of good recruits, and their quarterback is outstanding. I mean, they're in there, and I think you're going to hear a lot more from Maryland later on. And if you look back, I mean, losing to Indiana, and Indiana had a big win over the weekend. I mean, they could back and beat Michigan, and Ohio State is a loss, and we could have won that game against Indiana very easily. I mean, the 2-pointer is controversial, but I think we got to wait to see how this season plays out, because I think I think Hawksley has done a good job down there, and I think they're a pretty good football team.
Well, they may be heard from. I agree with you. Their skill people were really good. Penn State made them look like All-Americans, but the quarterback has played, in honor of Joe, young Tua has done a great job, and the receiver was a freshman. I mean, they shocked Penn State. Penn State's pass defense, I mean, if you're going to start listing things of concern, they've been lit up for 30 points 4 straight games. They're averaging, I think I was looking at some numbers, in 7 of the last 8 games, take out the Rutgers game at the end of the year, they're allowing 33 points a game in seven games.
Mike, you make a good point. That's a better Maryland team than we've seen in a while, but it's the same program that hasn't scored a touchdown, that had not scored a touchdown against Penn State in 3 consecutive games. The one thing that I thought, when I talk about people mailing it in, the one guy who didn't mail it in to me was Sean Clifford. And there were some other players too as well, Dotson, but I think Clifford's actually the other way. I think he's trying too hard. Doesn't it look that way? He's trying to make every single play. He's not throwing the ball when he needs to. I think he's got too much on his shoulders. We could debate whether they should have taken him out, but I think they have to try to get him to go a little bit easier on himself and not try to win things all by himself, because when he does that, I think that's when he makes his mistakes.
Big picture, there's so many problems with this team right now. The one, if you guys had to pick one to start, you got to start here and then kind of work yourself back to what we knew you guys as. What would that be?
For me, it would be the offensive line. I mean, without question. Beyond the coaching. I mean, I think ultimately everything speaks to what the coaching staff has done, and they would be the first ones to tell you this. But we expected this to be one of their better offensive lines, experienced, deep, and you get into a game like this for the second straight game, they really struggled. They don't know what's going on the right side. Until that gets fixed, that offense is not going to be what it needs to be.
I agree with Neil, the defensive secondary. I think they've lost more games in the last, maybe I don't know how many games teams come back from behind and scored in the last quarter. How many times has that happened to us? They look like they're disorganized there. And the coverage, I mean, you compare our coverage with Maryland's coverage. Maryland was all over our receivers. I mean, those guys couldn't move. They were breathing on them. But if you look, these guys are running across the middle wide open, catching passes. I think they had to reevaluate the secondary and figure out who's helping them and get rid of some people in the secondary. Make some changes.
And that's actually exactly.
Get rid of some people. This isn't the NFL.
And that's exactly.
Change some guys around.
But that's exactly why Penn State wasn't able to run, because Maryland's corners were able to lock down Penn State. Penn State really had very few people wide open. But back to your point about what they're asking from Clifford, the guy's carried the ball another 17 times. This is 51 times in 3 games. So you wonder why he thinks there's a lot on his shoulders.
Well, the good thing, Mike, at least in this game, the secondary didn't give up a big lead. It was on the other end of it. So.
Well, I agree with you. The secondary problem is the offensive line, because they haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, we lost a couple good running backs, which hasn't helped any, and they're still trying to sort out who's the best running back we have there. And I think Ford's going to do it for a while, but I think there's some other guys coming that might be able to run the ball a little better than Ford. But we'll wait and see how that pans out, I guess.
All right, so ahead on Nittany Nation Overtime, what side of the ball concerns you the most with this team, and is it fixable? We'll talk about that next.
The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
And welcome back to Nittany Nation Overtime here with the NitWits. All right, Mike, there's a plethora of items that Penn State needs to fix. Where do you start and really dive into, either offense or defense? Like, I mean, what are you seeing that just you just put your hands up like, what is going on here?
Well, I think we have problems on both sides of the ball. I mean, I would probably give them equal weighting, like 50% for the defense and 50% for the offense. Now, on defense, I think we do have, a good defensive line and linebackers. I mean, I think we're pretty solid there. I mean, maybe they haven't shown it, that may have been manhandled by a couple of these people. But our offensive line, and we have an excuse because of the running backs, but the offensive line hasn't moved anybody out. And I don't know if Maryland had that good a defensive line, but I think every game we've played, our offensive line hasn't been able to blow anybody out of there. And these guys can't get through that. There's no holes to run into. Nobody can run in that with that offense.
I think this would be the position of the coaching staff. And I think we have to understand, and this is something that's new to us in the last 10 years, is there was total stability among the assistant coaches. And now you're rotating different coordinators, position coaches, and there's a transition, whether them getting to know the talent getting to know them. I don't think there's a real identity. I didn't like when I think there's an impatience. They should have kicked the field goal, to make it 7-3. You just went on a 15-play drive. You got to get something out of that. And then the other thing is when Clifford was sacked and on the fumble, it's 3rd and 1. He's in the shotgun. Play action.
Go.
Run the ball.
Where's the fullback?
Run the ball, get a first down. 3rd and 1. So I just don't know if they know who they want to be.
Yeah, I would go touch on what Neil said when you talk about the coaching turnover. Nobody looks at Alabama and says, look, they lose all these coaches every year. How come they're struggling? What I will give James Franklin, credit or kind of a little bit of a pass on, to have the amount of turnover they had this year with other circumstances that arose. So you're talking about installing a relatively new offense, new receivers coach, although that's working out pretty well, new offensive line coach, new defensive line coach. You look at where most of the issues are, it's in a lot of those different areas. The other thing I would say about the defense, this is almost hard to believe, but Maryland scored 28 points offensively in that game. You know how many red zone snaps they had? 0.
Right.
They did not have a red zone snap. Those were all big plays. So we can talk about the offense, and I think overall the offensive line is the biggest problem. But when you're giving up that many big plays that a team doesn't even have to get into the red zone to beat you, that's a really bad thing.
And not only that, but I believe the first 2 touchdowns were the exact same play, just 20 yards back, and then the touchdown right before the half, the guy's 30 yards behind the defense, and there's only a minute to go. Is that more on players just not listening to coaches, or are the coaches just, they're the lack of preparation, like you said, Neil, like they're not ready to play?
I think that the yards after the catch was a huge factor yesterday, and this is a snowball effect. But you get back to, we've been talking about the offensive line now for several years.
Yeah.
There's 3 or 4 multiple year starters, a couple 3-year starters. I think it's lack of recruiting at that position.
Well, when you see them making the changes they did, bringing in Caden Wallace at right tackle and then moving Will Fries inside, bringing in Juice Scruggs at right guard later, they clearly, that's not platooning, that's desperation, trying to figure out what you're going to do during the course of the game. And at some point, you have to look toward the younger players. You just do, because if you're going to struggle, doesn't it make sense to do it with players who are going to maybe learn and have more of an upside?
And you did, with a couple of false starts consecutively by younger players.
Well, that wasn't, no. Two of those were on Walker, who's played a lot of football. So that wasn't young guys.
I agree with Neil on one other thing, like having the quarterback under center occasionally.
That's not happening, but
it should happen, though. I think it should happen. I was watching the Cowboys and the Steelers earlier this week. That's what they did. They played under center, and I think it hurts the offensive line performance, because if you look at every time they're protecting Clifford because they have to back up and pass block all the time, so they're not trying to blow anybody out in the line. So with the number of passes we had, the whole offensive line, all they did is retreat all day.
I nominate Neil to ask Franklin about that this week.
Yeah,
and a fullback.
And a fullback.
First question on the press. No, don't even let him get the opening statement in. But, no, in terms of Clifford, a lot of talk was like, should he be pulled? Not because he was, horrible, because he's trying his best out there. But is yesterday the kind of game where it's like, all right, this is a loss from us. Just don't get him hurt, just let him kind of regroup, or did you guys have any problem with him staying in there till the end?
No, I would have taken him out and given Levis a look. Number one, let's see what Levis can do. Number two, I think at that point Clifford had been sacked seven times. It turned it over 3 times. Let him take a deep breath. You weren't going to win that game. When you get to a certain point in the fourth quarter, when you know you're not going to win, I think that's when you put in the backup and let Clifford take a deep breath. I got to give Clifford credit, though. He comes out after every single game, puts the blame on himself. You can only do that so many times, but from dealing with us, which isn't an easy thing, he's been nothing but a class act.
Yeah, that's true. It's also part of the job to be a big-time quarterback in that program. I wondered, there were so many things that were going wrong. You weren't going to win the game, and he didn't maybe want to start a quarterback controversy on top of all that last week. But I didn't know who was being punished, Clifford or Levis.
Right.
But why wouldn't they get somebody else some experience?
Yeah.
I mean, he's been in there, and he's the starting quarterback.
At least in the last 5 minutes,
yeah, I mean,
the last 2 or 3 drives.
If he got hurt or something, then you're going to be looking for another quarterback. I mean, so I think you give him some time in there to let him get a feel for being on the field and let him go from there.
All right, coming up next, can anything be salvaged from the season? And were there any bright spots from yesterday's loss to Maryland? We'll talk about that next.
The NitWits are brought to you by Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
All right, welcome back. Now, granted, Penn State lost by multiple touchdowns, and those final scores were in the latter half of the fourth quarter. But I've been very impressed, guys, with the wide receiving corps, specifically Jahan Dotson. I think he has taken that next step. Yes, they're 0-3, but you know what? A lot of people were talking about this year. Could they replace KJ Handler? Who's going to be that other person besides Freiermuth? And I think Dotson's proven that. He's one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think Taylor Stubblefield, the new receivers coach, former Purdue great player, has been one of the unsung heroes on this team. I mean, it's tough to find unsung heroes when a team's struggling, but the way that he's worked with this young receiving corps has been, just tremendous. Obviously, you have Dotson, Parker Washington with 2 touchdown catches, and Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think you're going to see more and more of. The other thing I would say about Dotson, not only did he do it on the field, and maybe this means more to me because I'm in the media, but afterward, he really held his teammates accountable. I mean, he said some pretty strong things, not necessarily in a negative sense, but it's like, hey, this is not what Penn State's all about. People have to start focusing on the game more. So when you talk about a guy producing, not only did he produce on the field, but after the game, he said all the right things.
Mike, can anything be salvaged from this season? They're 0-3. There's no Big Ten championship, no college football playoff. Right now, you're just playing for pride. And a team that hasn't been 0-3 in almost 2 decades, this is, uncharted territory for probably a lot of these kids because they probably didn't lose in high school.
Well, I thought that was part of the program, but when I was at Penn State my sophomore year, we started out 0-3.
Yeah.
And then we came out and won 6 out of our next 7 games, and we ended up being number 14 in the country. But the biggest victory, we went out to Ohio State. Well, they were number 2 in the country.
After you were 0-3.
Yeah, after we were 0-3. And we went out to Ohio State. We were 2-3 when we went out to Ohio State. Okay. And they were undefeated and number 2 in the country. And we beat them 27-0 out there.
Yeah.
They didn't get a first down until the end of the third quarter.
Would that have been
That's when Woody Hayes was out there.
Yeah.
And,
would that have been Rip's greatest win, you think?
was the greatest win I was involved with.
Your greatest win. I'm not sure the greatest win.
Yes, I would say it probably was Rip's greatest win.
When you look at this, and Dodson hit on some things, because I think there are some leadership issues, and I know they have about 8 captains and a leadership council and whatnot, so you wonder, there's got to be leaders. But he identified some things, and you're in a different era right now of college football that you're going to be in, with opt-outs and transfers, and the players have a lot more freedom. So I'm kind of curious how that's all going to evolve. Yeah, they have a lot that they can still gain, and they have maybe even more that they could lose. In 01, they started out 0-4, but they were 5-5 going down to Virginia. It was the year of 9/11, and they were playing for a bowl game. They at least put themselves in a position to have a plus 500 season. So yeah, every game's a big game for a program like this.
Well, which captain has the best leadership qualities? Which one of the 8 has the best? I can't believe he has 8 guys as captain. I mean, I don't understand that.
Right? They should never have more than 2, right?
Well, I think 2 would be about that.
Mike wanted only 1.
Until I was there was always 1, and then they started 2 because you had offense and defense. But before that, you only had one team was playing both ways.
These guys were playing both ways. You only needed one.
Well, one thing I would say, with respect to the leadership is they said all the right things last week, and they still came out and laid an egg. What they need to do now is close out all the outside noise. I mean, you talk about how different things are. Could you have imagined 10 years ago when a guy leaves early for the NFL and you see him tweeting, negatively towards a team? I mean, this is what you're dealing with now. They have to tune all of that out.
But I think that's a negative on Parsons.
No, I know, I do. That's what I'm saying. I think that I'm saying they have to tune all of that stuff out. They have to tune the media out. They have to tune the fans out, with all due respect to the fans. But if they don't do that, this is not going to get any better. So they're really at an inflection point here. Are they going to go one way? Are they going to go the other? Maybe we'll give some hints in our predictions.
All right, coming up next, our Nitwit of the Year things. They're looking a little deflated right now. Can a trip to corn country fix that? We'll talk about that next.
The Nitwits are brought to you by Dorman's Jewelry. The answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage. No matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
All right, welcome back as we wrap things up here. Let's take a look at our Nitwit of the Year standings, and shout out to the deflated ball, running away with the Nitwit title for this year with 2. Neil, Mark, myself, we got to get it together. The only one who's picked it correctly is Tyler.
I think the deflated ball should be up at the top.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's having a great year.
All right, Penn State travels to Nebraska. Penn State about a field goal favorite, at least right now. Could change a lot during the week, but let's go with you, Mike. What's your thoughts on this game? Give us a prediction.
Well, I'm probably going to bet with my heart rather than my head. I'm going to go with Penn State. And ironically, I didn't know what the odds were going to be, but I'm picking Penn State 27, Nebraska 24.
27-24. All right, Neil.
I looked at this. You go back to Nebraska. These are 2 desperate teams with proud traditions. But I look at Penn State. They were 8-0. Basically about 7 games ago, and I think they're 3-5 since then, or 2-5 since then. Nebraska was getting blown out last year. I know Penn State just got blown out. I guess the moral of this story, I'm going to stick with Penn State and this core, this offensive core, to get it together, put some faith in Clifford, because I do think he's a leader. I'm going to say Penn State 27, Nebraska 20.
Mark, quickly.
I'm going to go with Nebraska. Penn State has to show to me that they can do it. So I'm going to go Nebraska 24, Penn State 21.
All right, I'm going Nebraska 23, Penn State 22 in a nail biter. That's going to do it for Nittany Nation Overtime. We'll see you next week. Hopefully we're celebrating a Penn State win, but we'll see you at this time next week.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By Encompass Health, a higher level of care. Encompass Healthcare. Ask for us by name. By Monarch Cleaners, for all your dry cleaning, carpet cleaning, and rug cleaning. By Reed and Solani Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By Allegheny Street Cigar, Blair County's only cigar lounge. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing and heating and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Freedom RV, Freedom RV Rentals, your best vacation ever. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Star Beverage, no matter what type of weather, we are a convenient drive-through one-stop beer store. By Kogan Electric, lighting the way for you. By Lions 247 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.